Hello, and welcome to Self-Awareness Path. Have we ever wondered why certain statements begin to feel true simply because they are heard again and again? Sometimes an idea is repeated in conversations, headlines, advertisements, or social media posts until it starts to feel familiar, comfortable, and strangely convincing. Even when we initially doubt it, the repetition slowly changes how believable it feels. This is not a coincidence. It is a well-documented psychological effect known as the illusion of truth. The human brain is designed to conserve energy. Instead of analyzing every piece of information deeply, it relies on shortcuts, mental processes that allow quick judgments without heavy thinking. One of these shortcuts is familiarity. When something feels familiar, the brain interprets that familiarity as a signal of safety, reliability, and sometimes even accuracy. The mind quietly assumes, if this idea keeps appearing, there must be some truth behind it. Over time, repetition creates the sensation of credibility. This mechanism once helped human survival. In early environments, familiar sounds, familiar places, and familiar patterns often indicated safety. Unknown signals could mean danger. Because of that evolutionary background, familiarity became strongly linked with trust. Today, however, the same mechanism operates in a world filled with advertising campaigns, viral posts, political messaging, and endless information streams. The brain still reacts to repetition as if it were a signal of reliability, even when the repetition is strategically engineered. Consider how slogans work. A simple phrase repeated often enough becomes memorable. Eventually, people start associating the phrase with truth, quality, or authority without consciously analyzing it. Marketing industries rely heavily on this effect, not necessarily because repetition proves something is correct, but because repetition increases the feeling that it is correct. The brain confuses familiarity with accuracy. The illusion of truth effect has been demonstrated repeatedly in psychological research. Participants are presented with a series of statements, some accurate and some false. Later, when asked which statements they believe are true, participants tend to rate the repeated statements as more believable than the new ones, even when they originally knew the statements were incorrect. The simple act of seeing or hearing the statement again increases perceived truthfulness. Knowledge alone does not always protect against repetition. Familiarity can still influence judgment. This explains why misinformation can spread so effectively. When a claim circulates repeatedly across different platforms, people begin encountering it in multiple contexts. Each encounter slightly increases familiarity, and with familiarity comes a subtle increase in perceived credibility. Eventually, the claim may feel widely accepted, even if it lacks evidence. The mind does not always ask, is this supported by facts? It often asks unconsciously, have we heard this before? Repetition also shapes personal beliefs in quieter ways. If we constantly tell ourselves that something is impossible, that belief begins to feel solid, simply because it has been repeated internally many times. Negative self-talk gains strength, not because it is accurate, but because it becomes familiar. In the same way, encouraging statements repeated consistently can begin to reshape confidence and expectations. The mind treats repeated internal thoughts much like repeated external messages. Understanding this phenomenon gives us an important advantage. When we recognize that familiarity can create the feeling of truth, we become more cautious about equating repetition with accuracy. Instead of asking how often an idea appears, we begin asking where it comes from, what evidence supports it, and who benefits from its spread. Critical thinking begins with slowing down the automatic reaction that says, this sounds familiar, therefore it must be correct. It is also useful to notice how repetition influences social perception. When certain narratives are repeated often enough about groups, behaviors, or trends, they begin to feel like widely accepted realities. Over time, repeated narratives can shape cultural assumptions, stereotypes, and expectations. The power of repetition is not limited to advertising or media. It quietly shapes the way societies interpret events and people. However, repetition itself is not negative. It becomes powerful depending on how it is used. Education relies heavily on repetition because repeated exposure helps memory formation and understanding. Skills improve through repeated practice. Constructive ideas, when repeated consistently, can reinforce helpful habits and values. The key difference lies in awareness. When repetition is used intentionally to strengthen useful knowledge, it becomes a learning tool. When repetition operates unnoticed, It can quietly influence beliefs without careful evaluation. Another reason repetition increases perceived truth is processing fluency. When the brain encounters information that is easy to process because it has been seen before, it experiences a subtle sense of comfort. That ease of processing is interpreted as a signal that the information is reliable. In reality, the ease simply comes from familiarity, not from evidence. Yet the mind translates that smooth processing into a feeling that this makes sense, even if the claim itself is unsupported. This is why repeating a correction only once may not be enough to counter repeated misinformation. If a false claim is heard 10 times and the correction is heard only once, the false claim still feels more familiar. Over time, familiarity alone may cause the inaccurate idea to feel more believable. Consistent exposure to accurate information is therefore necessary to balance the psychological effect of repetition. The awareness of this phenomenon can transform how we interact with information every day. Instead of measuring truth by exposure, we begin measuring it by verification. Instead of accepting ideas because they appear everywhere, we ask whether credible sources support them. This shift may seem small, yet it dramatically changes the way beliefs are formed. It moves decision-making from automatic familiarity to deliberate evaluation. We can also apply this understanding to our internal mindset. The thoughts repeated daily gradually become mental defaults. If the internal dialogue constantly repeats doubts, limitations, and negative predictions, those ideas begin to feel unquestionably real. On the other hand, repeating constructive perspectives, such as the possibility of growth, improvement, and learning, gradually changes what feels believable. Repetition programs the mental environment in which decisions are made. The illusion of truth effect reminds us that the brain is not a perfect detector of reality. It is a pattern recognition system designed for efficiency, not always for accuracy. Because of this, awareness becomes essential. The moment we recognize that repetition can shape perceived truth, we gain the ability to pause before accepting information automatically. That pause creates space for reasoning, investigation, and conscious choice. In a world where information flows continuously, the ability to distinguish familiarity from truth becomes a powerful skill. Many messages are repeated not because they are accurate, but because repetition increases acceptance. Understanding this dynamic helps us avoid being unconsciously guided by exposure alone. It allows us to step back and evaluate ideas based on evidence rather than frequency. Over time, developing this awareness changes how we listen, read, and even think. We begin noticing when an idea feels convincing simply because it has been repeated. Instead of reacting immediately, we examine the foundation behind it. We ask whether the statement remains valid when stripped of its repetition. This habit gradually strengthens independent thinking and protects against manipulation. Repetition will always remain a powerful psychological force. It shapes memory, learning, culture, and belief systems. Yet once we understand its influence, we no longer experience it passively. We can choose which ideas we allow to repeat in our minds, which messages we question, and which information we verify before accepting. Awareness turns an automatic process into a conscious decision. When we understand that repeating an idea can make it feel more true over time, we begin to see how much of human belief is influenced not only by evidence, but by exposure. And the moment this realization becomes clear, a new level of mental freedom appears, the freedom to decide that familiarity alone will no longer determine what we believe to be true. Thanks for watching. Your support is crucial to us at Self-Awareness Path. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to stay updated and help our channel grow. Don't forget to like and share. It shows your appreciation and boosts our visibility. We value your feedback or any suggestions you might have, so drop a comment. Explore more content on our channel. There's plenty to discover. Thanks for being part of our community, and see you in the next video.